In a result that few outside the Portland locker room saw coming, the Portland Fire delivered a resounding 75-56 road victory over the Washington Mystics on Thursday night, July 16, 2026, turning in one of the most complete defensive performances of their season. What made the win especially sweet for Portland was the opponent and the timing. This was a rematch of one of the most memorable regular season games in recent WNBA history, and the Fire made absolutely certain there would be no repeat of the previous heartbreak. The victory improved Portland's record to 11-14 on the season, while Washington dropped to 12-11. On paper, the result might look like a modest swing in the standings. In practice, it was a statement, a reminder that the Fire, despite an inconsistent season, are capable of playing suffocating, championship-level defense when everything clicks. To understand why this game carried extra weight, it's worth revisiting the last time these two teams met. On June 28, 2026, Portland and Washington played one of the most dramatic games in league history, a 4-overtime marathon that Washington eventually won 124-123, a result that tied for the longest game ever played in the WNBA. That contest was defined by chaos, extended possessions, late-game heroics, and a scoreline that ballooned well past 100 points for both sides. It was the kind of game that lingers in a team's memory, for better or worse. Thursday night's rematch could not have looked more different. Where the June contest was in track meet decided in the final seconds of a fourth overtime period, this one was over as a contest by the second quarter. Portland made sure that if there was going to be a sequel to that instant classic, it would be written entirely on their terms. Portland set the tone from the opening tip, jumping out to an early lead and never looking back. By the end of the first quarter, the Fire had built a commanding 28-13 advantage, shooting efficiently while forcing Washington into uncomfortable rushed possessions. The Mystics, playing at home and looking to build on a stretch in which they had won 4 of their previous 5 games, appeared out of sync from the opening whistle. The margin only grew from there. Portland extended its lead to 43-20 by the midpoint of the second quarter, a stretch during which the Fire connected on a string of 3-pointers, while Washington's offense sputtered badly. At one point early in the second quarter, Portland had already made 4 shots from beyond the arc, while the Mystics had managed only 4 field goals in total, a disparity that captured just how one-sided the opening half had become. Washington's offensive struggles were not confined to a single bad quarter. Across all 4 periods, the Mystics simply could not find any rhythm. They shot an anemic 29.7% from the field for the game, and were even worse from 3-point range, connecting on just 2 of 21 attempts. Turnovers compounded the misery. Washington committed 19 giveaways over the course of the night, with 9 different players charged with at least 1 turnover. It was, by any measure, one of the most complete offensive collapses the Mystics have suffered all season. Portland's defense deserves the Lions' share of the credit. Rather than relying on a single standout defensive performer, the Fire smothered Washington collectively, using disciplined, hedging coverage against the Mystics' pick-and-roll actions to disrupt any semblance of offensive flow. Washington's shooters found themselves consistently off balance, while ball handlers struggled to locate clean driving or passing lanes. The third quarter briefly offered Washington a glimmer of hope on the defensive end. The Mystics held Portland to just 12 points in the period, but their own offense could only muster 14 points in response, meaning the deficit barely moved. It was symptomatic of Washington's night as a whole. Even their good stretches weren't good enough to matter, because the offense simply would not cooperate. Portland pushed the lead back out to 20 points in the middle of the fourth quarter, prompting Washington head coach Sidney Johnson to empty the bench and effectively concede the outcome with several minutes still remaining. The final margin settled at 19 points, a 75-56 final that flattered Washington only slightly, given how thoroughly they had been outplayed for the majority of the evening. Guard Carla Leite led all Portland scorers with 14 points, running the offense efficiently, while also contributing 5 assists on a night when the Fire needed steady decision-making more than dazzling individual scoring. Leite shot roughly 42% from the field, a solid clip that reflected Portland's overall offensive discipline. Forward Sierra Williams turned in an outstanding performance in her first start of the season, finishing with 12 points on remarkably efficient shooting, converting on the vast majority of her attempts from the field. Williams stepped into an expanded role out of necessity. Starting center Megan Gustafson was away from the team, preparing for her wedding, which forced Portland's rotation to adjust on short notice. Williams more than answered the call, providing scoring punch and physicality in the front court, despite giving up size to Washington's bigs. Guard Sarah Ashley Barker also had a strong all-around night, contributing 10 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 steals, a stat line that speaks to her impact at both ends of the floor. Her ability to generate extra possessions through disruptive defense played a meaningful role in Washington's turnover-plagued evening. Off the bench, Frida Booner provided a jolt of shooting, connecting on all 3 of her three-point attempts and finishing with 9 points. Taja Oblak matched that scoring total, also chipping in 9 points in a reserve role. As a team, Portland shot a robust 10 of 35 from beyond the arc, a modest overall percentage that nonetheless proved more than sufficient given how well the Fire controlled the game defensively and on the glass in terms of possessions gained through turnovers. If there was a silver lining for the Mystics on an otherwise forgettable night, it was the play of center Shakira Austin. Austin was Washington's only consistent source of offense, finishing with a game-high 19 points to go along with 9 rebounds and 4 assists. Her ability to score inside stood in stark contrast to the struggles of her teammates on the perimeter, where the Mystics shot just under 10% from three-point range as a team. Washington did have one statistical advantage on the night: rebounding. The Mystics out-rebounded Portland by a wide margin, and their 20 offensive rebounds in particular gave them numerous second-chance opportunities that, under normal circumstances, might have been enough to keep them competitive. Washington also won the free throw scoring battle. But none of it mattered because the turnovers and abysmal shooting percentages overwhelmed any advantage the extra possessions might have provided. It was a night where the box score's secondary numbers told a very different story from the one that actually determined the outcome. At 11-14, Portland sits in the middle of the Western Conference standings, and this win, while significant, is unlikely to dramatically alter the team's playoff positioning on its own. The Fire have won just 3 of their last 8 games entering this contest, meaning their season has been defined more by inconsistency than sustained dominance. That context makes Thursday's performance all the more notable. It showed a level of defensive execution and discipline that, if replicated more consistently, could make Portland a much tougher out down the stretch of the season. The timing of the win also carries symbolic value. Avenging a heartbreaking 4-overtime loss, particularly one that will be remembered as among the longest games in league history, offers a psychological boost that can't be measured purely in the standings. Teams that suffer excruciating losses like the one Portland experienced on June 28th sometimes carry the emotional weight of that result for weeks. Thursday's decisive win suggests the Fire have moved past it, and moved past it in the most emphatic way possible, by making sure the rematch was never competitive. Both teams now turn their attention to tough road tests against conference leaders. Portland heads to Minnesota to face the Lynx, one of the top teams in the Western Conference, on Saturday night, a game that will be a considerably stiffer challenge than what the Fire encountered against a struggling Mystics offense. Washington, meanwhile, travels to take on the Golden State Valkyries also on Saturday, as they look to bounce back from one of their worst offensive showings of the season. For Washington, the immediate priority will be diagnosing what went wrong offensively. A 29.7% shooting night combined with 19 turnovers is not a performance that can be easily written off as an anomaly if it happens again. The Mystics will need to shore up their execution against physical, switching defenses if they hope to avoid similar collapses against other disciplined defensive teams later in the season. For Portland, the challenge will be consistency. The Fire have shown flashes of the kind of defensive intensity that can carry a team deep into playoff contention, but they've also struggled to string together results throughout the year. Thursday's win over Washington offers a blueprint: disciplined defensive rotations, controlled offensive possessions, and contributions from up and down the roster. But replicating that formula against elite competition like Minnesota will be the true test of whether this performance marks a turning point or simply a satisfying, one-off result against a team the Fire clearly had extra motivation to beat. Either way, Thursday night belonged to Portland. What began as